Okay, post game for the U.S. 2-0 win by Japan. Not a game to remember for the U.S. in terms of positive takeaways. No shots on goal. Obviously shut out by another team going to the World Cup. I would say in sort of a similar place as the U.S., which is sort of hovering around that second or third place in their group as far as expectations go. Could get through, could not get through. But Japan outclassing the U.S. Tactically and just technically, performance-wise, overall. I said during the live stream we just did that it can be exhilarating to watch your national team, Charlie. It can also be very difficult at times when they don't play at the level you would hope for, especially given where we are, which is less than 60 days until a World Cup. What are your overriding thoughts after this 2-0 defeat in Dusseldorf?
I'm disappointed like everyone else, just in the approach of the game, not being able to adjust in real time, seeing that certain positioning has not worked, the style of play, they weren't threatening. That's what really is concerning to me. It was they weren't threatening. They were keeping possession at times when they did in their defensive half. There was no deep threats. There was no pushing up the lines. Okay, if we compete and play ugly, then we play ugly. I think that's what was so great about looking back at past men's national teams days is just being flexible and saying, hey, we don't have it today for whatever reason, but we know that if we're just going to lump it forward and then win possession in the attacking half, then we can start picking the opponents apart, connecting passes, be a little bit more threatening. 1v1 situations, where were they? I didn't see anyone taking 1v1s and getting the better of their player, winning the duels. We weren't winning duels, bad passes. Second half was much better than the first half, but given the complete performance, so subpar.
Where do you stand?
Yeah,
Parky?
I agree. Really good points from Charlie. We talk about like why do you keep possession, right? And why do you try and build out of the back? It's to stretch the other team. It's to create overload advantages on the wing to get in behind, right? We tried to build out of the back, but we didn't have nearly enough of that success where you're breaking lines, getting the ball wide, getting crosses in the box, creating opportunities, putting pressure on their back line. It just wasn't there. We saw a couple here and there, but a couple throughout the game is not enough. And, so that's disappointing. It was a huge opportunity for some of the players today to cement getting on the plane at least. And, a couple did okay, and a couple probably are going to have a tough time sleeping tonight thinking about it. And I think Greg will probably have a tough time sleeping tonight thinking, shoot, where do we go from here, right? How do I get the confidence back in the group? Do we adjust things? Did I make the right personnel decisions? All those things. But I don't think it's not doom is gloom, right? I'm an optimistic person. I still think that like we got a talented team, and we're going to get things together, and our performances are going to be much better than that come World Cup.
So we have a bunch of people in our comments here. Johnny B, we should be fine-tuning, not experimenting. There were a number of substitutions in this game, all pre-planned, it seemed, from Greg. Yikes, not encouraging, panic engaged. That game was so disappointing, slow, tired, poor defense, no movement, off the ball, etc. How much of this is truly concerning as it pertains to the World Cup, and how much of this is one bad performance? How much of this carries over? Because we said during the live stream, if you're Wales in game one, if you're England, obviously, but if you're Iran and Wales in particular, you're looking at this match and thinking, we can get at the U.S. if we make them make the game out of the back and route them into predictable positions. They're susceptible to being pressed. And they weren't high pressing at all times, Japan. They were, there was a little like mid-block at times. There were some times where they did go high, but they understood where they wanted to have the ball go and how predictable it would get afterwards.
It's a bit more concerning than just it's a bad game for me.
Right. Yep.
Because there's so much on the line, not for this particular game, but for the players in the game, right? There is a World Cup coming, and like there's not many opportunities to play with your national team before that World Cup happens. And so there's a lot of emphasis on this game. And so you'd hope and expect that the players would be at their top level, right? Giving it everything they've got and being good on the ball and up for the moment. Because at the World Cup, right, you have one game like this and it puts you in a bad hole, right? You have one game like this and it could be that could be it. It could be no coming back from. So it's not like we can forgive it totally. And again, I'm not a doom and gloom guy saying like, okay, no expectations now for the World Cup. But at the same time, I think everybody within the group needs to look at themselves and say, hey, like we cannot have a performance like this when it matters. And today didn't matter as far as being in a tournament or anything like that, but it mattered for all those players on the field. So that's what's concerning.
So Greg Berhalter being interviewed on ESPN right now. First question about the overall game. I think that we can do better. Silly mistakes, silly giveaways. Give credit to Japan for the way they pressed. But he is resisting big picture sort of takeaways, saying they'll evaluate on tape here. And I've heard this from him before. He said he wanted more personality in the match from the players you've played under, Greg. What do you think he means, Parky, about more personality?
Well, I think that sometimes the best, like when we used to play the Red Bulls and they press so well, right? Something that kills a press is somebody being able to dribble by an opponent. Like Charlie said earlier, right? If you've got an outside back that's able to dribble past a pressing winger, or you've got somebody in the midfield who's able with their first touch or a couple touches to escape pressure, it crumbles things because a lot of times the press is man for man, momentarily. And so then somebody has to come over and cover it and then like things open up. We weren't able to do that anywhere on the field. Like Adams did it one time early in the second half. We talked about it.
Gio had a moment there, but one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And those moments stuck out for us, obviously. Right. And because they were few and far between, but also because it opened things up. So we didn't see enough of that for sure. And I think that's the creativeness that we're looking for. And maybe he was talking about just creativeness and style of play, and overcoming those challenges and changing the way we played. Although something big picture like that could have been communicated from the bench.
Charlie, no shots on goal. That's a concern. I mean, we're talking about, giveaways on the back line, issues, no shots on goal.
No shots on goal. And I'll go back to that Jesus Ferrari chance. That's to start the game. You talk about setting kind of the course of this match on the right, getting everybody in the right frame of mind. And you had a perfect opportunity that comes from Dest. He plays in a perfect ball, and he doesn't put it on goal. He got his whole head on it, so it's not too short, and it's the timing. He pulled himself off the center back, found the pocket, but then jumped off like his back heels. You just can't do that. And I'll go back to even Pepe is better in the air than Jesus Ferreira, but Pifuk is a striker who's scoring in the Bundesliga and has height. Like that's where you want him. Type of striker, and that's why I think you can't leave him off this roster because you need different options. And at the end of the day, regardless of who's playing there, it just wasn't good enough there because that was just one opportunity. Did we ever see that again? No, we didn't. And that for me is kind of just the signaling the problems within this group because they didn't carry the play to create more opportunities where you have Serginho Dest in those advanced positions. Because it was one time and then Japan adjusted and we didn't. And so just the attack was so poor that is in essence kind of our problem in the end is we didn't generate enough chances. There weren't variety. Set pieces were really poor. When we talk about Weston McKennie, that's one area where he really excels. He was really below average today. I mean, really poor for Weston McKennie. Considering where he plays and what he can play too, not good enough today. Tyler Adams was too active. When someone is so hyped up, he was moving around too much, coming out of position, and therefore there were more gaps and spaces for Japan to exploit. Yeah, and then Reyna, he had some moments where he was good on the dribble, but not in the attacking half. It was in the defensive half or in the middle third. We want Gio Reyna to be doing that in the attacking third. And then Aronson, when you saw that shot at the end, just it was almost like, where was that? It was because we didn't have the ball in the attacking third, and there weren't too many breakthrough moments in transition because we were not in good spaces. We weren't in the right position. So there are so many things that are concerning. I mean, in terms of tinkering, sure, Christian Pulisic's out, Yunus Musa's out, no Timo Weah, no Anthony Robinson, but we should already have our identity down and our players. And I feel like there's too many question marks at this point. I'm not one to put too much stock in friendlies, but this one's disappointing considering there's not many left, and considering that we went a whole cycle in World Cup qualifying. We should know what our strengths are, and we should play to our strengths. We didn't do that at all.
All right, winners and losers. Who are the winners from this? And it may just be guys that aren't here. It may be the likes of Pifok. It may be, Musa in a sense, in sort of the way that the U.S. is relying on his ball advancement ability and that personality, as Greg Berhalter puts it. Michael, who are your biggest winners? And I know this is a difficult segment to do after a match like this, but
I think the biggest winner is Matt Turner. It's never great when the man of the match, especially in a loss, is your goalkeeper, because that means it could have been a lot worse. But he was very good today, so his stock went way up for me. I think Mark McKenzie's stock went up. I think Aaron Long didn't go down too much, but it didn't go up, and I thought McKenzie's went up. So it was good from him. Vines, I thought, was kind of neutral. So for me, I think those two are the only ones whose stock went up. Yeah, that's it. Two that go up.
Yeah, that kind of says it all. Yeah, it's a center back that came on at halftime to help calm things down, and then your goalkeeper who had to stand on his head 3 or 4 times just to keep it 2-0. Charlie, are the guys whose stock went up who were not here, did not play, and because they weren't here and not associated with this performance, have to reemerge in Greg's mind? I think Pifok would be sort of your prime guy there as far as guys that just weren't called up. Maybe Chris Richards would be one that would come into more of a place of like, oh, okay, maybe as a starter we have to look at that harder. But not having these opportunities hurts him. I don't think you can say in having an absentia, truly his stock can go up because he can't prove it. Who would you put in the stock up column? Anybody additionally to those two?
No, I'm with Parky. Weah and Musa are probably, and Pulisic, because you can throw in Christian. So those three in particular. Anthony Robinson, I don't know how much of an effect he would have had in this game. You know what you're going to get from him. He's very consistent, but because everything was so disjointed in midfield and the center backs were giving the ball away a ton, I'm not so sure he would have really had an impact the way that we would hope. But for sure, Musa, Weah, and Pulisic. And then I'll again say Pifok, given that opportunity and knowing he is in form, he wouldn't have started. Even if he was called in, he wouldn't have started this match just because we know Jesus Ferreira would have gotten the start. But that just goes to show how important it is to have a striker that's a little bit different and one that is really apt to take advantage of opportunities just like that in the box. That's his game. His game is just capitalizing on service. He's not a striker who's going to beat you on the dribble. He's not a striker who's known for his movement, maybe his box movement, but not his movement outside of the box and checking to the ball. But you need a striker who's just going to score goals, especially when you're in a situation like you were today. You're down a goal. What kind of substitution can you bring in to change the game? I'd like to see when you're down a goal against Japan. And him having someone play off of him and create space, and then him capitalizing on balls being whipped into the box. That's an area where Jordan Pifok will thrive. So, there were a number of players who were below average today. So it's unfair to kind of say Jesus Ferreira didn't do his job, but he had his one opportunity. We talked about that against Uruguay, Morocco in the last round of games. He put himself in good positions, didn't score. Today, put himself in a good position, didn't score. How many times can we put ourselves in good positions and not finish? In the World Cup, you get one opportunity. Typically, that's all it is, especially against an England. It's a side that's better than you across the line. So you have to defend perfectly. The tactics have to be on point. But then when you do get that one chance, you have to capitalize. And if you're talking about a player, has a player given you confidence to say, oh, yeah, let's go with him? No, absolutely not. So that's why I feel like this position is still wide open, and that's a concern.
I'll add two more names now that I'm thinking about it. I think Jordan Morris's stock went up today because I think that he gets on the plane to Qatar, for me, definitely, because this game showed the need for speed and a vertical threat. And right now, I think we talked about it earlier, that only Weah and him provide. And so I don't think that Jordan is a starter on this team, don't get me wrong. But I think he gets on the plane because he provides something that is lacking within the group. And then I think the other name for me is Dest, only because I think Cannon struggled in the second half. And so, I think for some of us, he was a lockdown, but, his club form is a little bit interesting. But now for me, he's locked in as a starter.
Is that a Yedlin, again, an absentia rise as well? I mean, Greg has gone to Yedlin in big matches at right back when Serginho hasn't been available.
Yeah, I think it does help Yedlin for sure. For me, I think that Yedlin for me is a little bit better defensively, and Cannon has a higher ceiling offensively than Yedlin, and so probably that's why the substitution was the way it was today. Down at halftime, trying to get back in the game, get more offensive. So maybe that does help Yedlin.
So as we turn the page to Saudi Arabia, we have the U.S. press conference live right now. It's being tweeted out. It's not actually a virtual availability, so we're not able to be on that call. So I'll sort of communicate quotes as they come in if they're pertinent. Greg Berhalter opened his press conference, Charlie, with, quote, "We've got work to do. We clearly need to improve." I'll sort of switch that around and sort of, look, the manager, and Greg knows this, is going to be under pressure. His decisions are going to be put under the microscope. What did you think of the way that Greg set the team up and the tactics in this match? Was there something that Greg could have done different within this performance, or is this a player issue?
I think De La Torre, McKinney, Adams, just there's not enough of a player who can get forward and support Jesus. For me, it's a lot of side to side looking at that midfield. And, De La Torre is a player who is great in a system where you have a defensive midfielder. In Tyler Adams, he would be the 8, and then you have someone who's more of an attacking midfielder. So I don't think De La Torre should have been set up in that position. I would have liked to see Aronson in that position, or Reyna, someone who is going to push a little bit higher. Reyna probably for me would be the guy I would have liked to see central because he's good on the ball, and then he could potentially be the one to break through, find the spots, and be a little bit more aggressive from that midfield position. And then on the wingers, this is a game where Christian Pulisic could have had a big role in terms of getting on the ball and being able to break down players in 1v1 situations. Because in games like this where the passing isn't great, you need guys who are good on the dribble, who can create space on their own and turn guys, run at players. We didn't see that. There just didn't exist. So given that there is no way Musa, Anthony Robinson, I'm okay with his selection. I never thought he'd start Mark McKenzie in this game, but I think Mark McKenzie should definitely start in the next match.
Were there in-game adjustments that Greg could have made, Michael, or is that, we sort of discussed, hey, players have to recognize that as well? I mean, ultimately it comes to the World Cup. I mean, it's going to be, the adjustments have to get made if you're in that position. How do you sort of evaluate that in-game management? Yeah,
I totally agree, right? If it's not going well after 20 minutes, you can't wait until halftime, right? It's too valuable, those 25, 30 minutes, right? And it's both, right? It's the players didn't perform well. There's no doubt about it, right? You've got a game plan they wanted to try and break through the press, which I get, right? That's the way that Greg plays, right? But when does plan B kick in? Is there a cohesive plan B? Does everybody know that there's a plan B? And when does it get instituted? And that's what was lacking. And that's what's a little concerning for me, only because I've played with it in it as well. And I know that, like, you get to a point where then you're second guessing yourself and you're not confident. And, oh, should I play these passes? It's not working. There's no openings. And even the other guys that I'm passing it to, they know, like, oh my God, if I show for this ball and I get it, I know I've got a guy right up my butt. And do I have another guy supporting me? And then guys kind of shy away from things. And then it becomes a confidence issue. And all the while, the other team's confidence is just growing and growing and growing, and they're like, oh, I can't wait to press this guy. Or like, oh, here's the moment. Like, and they're just growing in confidence as the US team is going the other way. And so, yeah, I do think the adjustment needs to come either from the bench or from the players and say, hey, kick the ball long for a little bit, get the ball in the other half of the field, turn the press around, right? Let's go try and press them. Win some fouls, win some throw-ins, like slow things down a little bit, at least get a breather, get out of your back line, get out of your own half of the field, like those types of things. And the whereabouts to know how to do that and when to do it wasn't there.
You saw the touch map from the first half. At least if you're watching the stream, it was all in our own half. Sort of the most turnovers in our own half and a half during Greg Berhalter's tenure as well. I think that's pretty clear to anybody watching. But 58% possession for the U.S., just 4 shots, none on goal, just 2 corner kicks. Compare that to 42% for Japan, 16 shots, 8 shots on goal, 8 corners. They knew how they wanted to play this game, and their game plan worked very, very well. Here is another quote from Greg Berhalter. You may have seen it on the screen there. We're watching as his press conference goes on. We need to play with personality. We need to play relaxed. We need to play with intensity. And when we do these things, we're a really good team. But when we don't, we're an average team. What's the reaction to that quote, guys? And then we'll turn our attention to Saudi Arabia.
I think everything that he's saying is expected. He hasn't had a chance to look at it. He's not going to throw anybody under the bus. He knows that guys are going to read some stuff, and he's got a team to prepare for the World Cup, and wants these guys to have confidence in the way that they play. And he's right about some of that stuff, right? You do have to have confidence and play with that fine line of confidence and relax versus like, okay, a sense of like urgency and knowing that, okay, things could break down and how do you balance those things? So yeah, he's not wrong. And, these are expected quotes, I think, from a coach after a performance like that.
Here's another one. Quote, I agree with the energy side of it. Asked whether the team lacked energy today. I don't know if the proximity of the World Cup has anything to do with it. The guys didn't look fresh. And from a physical output, we looked a step behind. They will get on a plane basically immediately and go to Murcia, Spain, to play Saudi Arabia, the second of these 2 friendlies. When they go to the World Cup, there will be an MLS camp, a camp for players that are not in the playoffs or whose playoff push has ended in MLS. There'll be time to get those guys sort of up to speed as much as you can physically and sharpness-wise. But they will get to Qatar with about a week before that first game against Wales, which is now in 59 days. There will not be a long pre-World Cup camp as there has been in the past for sort of fitness and sharpness purposes as a team. There will not be a huge build ahead as far as friendlies to give them opportunities to work out any kinks. This is kind of it in a lot of ways, just given the way the timing works of this particular World Cup. Charlie, look ahead to Saudi Arabia. What do you want to see? What kind of lineup do you want to see? What kind of performance do you want to see? What do we need to see?
I want to see them aggressive in the attacking third. I want to see shots on goal. I want to see transition moments where we're a little bit more direct. It's great to have it look all pretty in possession, but at some point you want to see results. You want to see chances created. You want to see us being on the front foot. I don't care how pretty it is, but be playing the attacking half. The first half, it was like, let's sit back and keep possession. Center backs drop deep and right in front, right on top of Matt Turner. I want to see them high. At some point, I just want to see us using our attacking players and letting them get touches on the ball, because Jesus Ferreira was on the island. He had to defend, and I know Greg wants your center forward. I'd rather have my center forward attacking. I'd rather be looking at chances and seeing him touch the ball. That just didn't exist with the style of play. So for me, it's about he used the word personality in the post-game interview. Let's see that attacking personality. Let's see guys want to have the ball and create chances and beat players on the dribble and combined. That's what I'm focused on.
What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I agree. I will see a confident group, right? Whatever the game plan is, right? Do it with confidence. Play like you belong on the team and at the World Cup and representing the U.S., right? Play up to the moment, right? This isn't a World Cup game, no, but this is some of those guys' World Cup games, right? This will determine whether they get a chance to do it at the World Cup, right? So play up to the moment. Don't, for today's performance, just seem like some guys were timid, and especially when things didn't start off well in the first 10 minutes, right? And then, it became contagious, some of the touches and bad plays, right? I just want to see a group play up to the moment, right? Even if things don't go well, even if you don't finish your chances, right? At least create some, right? You're going to make a bad pass every now and then. That's fine. But the overall confidence of the group and individuals, I really hope it's much better against Saudi Arabia.
Are there any changes to the 11 that you would want to see? You mentioned Mark McKenzie, Charlie. Are there any personnel changes that you would like to see? How does that lineup look to you? We'll start with you, Parky.
Yeah, I agree. I would definitely give Mark the opportunity to play next to Walker from the start and see how that goes. Do
you make a change up top, or is it Jesus's opportunity once again? I mean, he had the one chance, but we sort of went over it. Like your team doesn't have the ball, you're getting pressed off the park in your own half. It's pretty hard to affect the game in that sense. I mean, winger wise, was it the right mix?
I think winger wise, yeah, I think that assuming Pulisic can't go, I think that was the right call with the wingers. So I would probably stick with them again. I'd like to see a little bit of change in at the number 8 position. If you take De La Torre out, and who do you bring in? Who do you give that opportunity to? There's a couple different players, right? Whether you play Tillman or Acosta. Who do you put in that position, and kind of affects how the team plays. But I would make that change and see how the midfield group performs with a little bit different of a personnel. At the starting center forward position, I don't know. That's a really tough one.
It's a question for Charlie.
It is a question for Charlie. He's the striker. I'm not. So.
Yeah. At this point, I'm going to start Sargent and see what he can do. I think Ferreira had his time. He didn't score his goal, although I understand the game was rough. But that's just how it is sometimes. You have to figure out ways to make an impact if you're not getting the ball. And he had his one opportunity, and then defensively or getting on the ball, okay, figure out a way to earn fouls, whatever it is. He was lost in that game. So I would give the opportunity to Josh Sargent and then bring on Pepe as a substitute for Sargent if nothing comes from that.
I'll end you guys on this one, and you can see here on screen that U.S. Saudi Arabia Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, FS1 Unimas Studio, and we will do another one of these watch-alongs as well. Thank you to everybody who tuned in on Twitch and YouTube Live. Does this performance change in any way at all either of your expectations for the U.S. and Qatar at the World Cup? That's a no for you.
Not for me, no.
Your expectations remain what?
Get out of the group. You get out of the group. At the very minimum, you get out of the group, and the expectation is you finish second in the group to England, but you're getting out of the group.
Yeah.
This team should beat Wales, and this team should beat Iran. So, the wild card game is England. You're expected to lose, but you can get a result. With a great performance, you can definitely get a result against England, especially considering that all the pressure is on England. So, no, nothing changes for me. All I know is that this game better light a fire under the butts of every single player on in this possible camp, as well as Berhalter. Just being a little bit more aggressive. And maybe it's one of those things where you say, okay, this has been our philosophy most of the time, but let's be a little bit more direct. Because let's play to our strengths. At the end of the day, how many players do we have that can really play out of the back? I always used to say that when we played against the Columbus Crew, Parky, you didn't have too many players that were confident on the ball. And I know that's what Greg wants you guys to do and force you guys to play that way. But then you got to a point where you're saying, okay, if anyone's going to play out of the back, it's Parky. And if Parky's not on the ball, guess what? We're going to be a little bit more direct. We're not going to take time on the ball. And then things got better for you because teams were confident that players would take extra touches or make that pass, and that didn't happen. Then the game really opened up for you guys. So I think we can't just focus on building out of the back when sometimes we don't have the players to build out of the back. When you have Aaron Long and Walker Zimmerman as your center backs, you can't build out of the back. I'm sorry, that's not their strength. That is not it. They have improved their game playing passes, but that's not their strength. So I'd say kind of step away from that being kind of the responsibilities of our back line.
I hope that we can look back, when the World Cup occurs, or maybe after the first game of the World Cup, and say, hey, man, I'm glad we got our butts kicked, in that game. It was a great lesson to be learned, and it was a good time to learn it as a group, and we learned from it, right? If that is the case, then you can still look at today as a positive of like, hey, the group learned a lot in that game, right? We learned how to face adversity. We learned, okay, if you're not on your best at the day, on the day, which might happen at a World Cup, hopefully not, how do you still get a result, right? Even if you're not good, right? Can you still get a result? Because that's what matters. And so hopefully there's lessons learned today. That's the best you can ask for from a game like today.
I think the U.S. has been at their best, and it seemed like Greg had sort of acknowledged that this group is at their best. Pressing, being a little bit more direct, not necessarily being the team that has to make the game, which they had tried to be really in the early parts of his tenure. But Japan flipped the script on us. Japan had the game played in the areas of the field that they wanted played in, at the pace they wanted played, and they take the win today, 2-0. A learning experience, we hope, for the U.S. We'll be back on Tuesday for U.S. Saudi Arabia, hoping for a better result. That's always the deal. 59 days to Wales.
Much love to everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Been a joy to watch with you guys.
I am joining Heath and Jimmy now. So
to pick your brains and your expertise. So thank you to Michael Parkhurst and Charlie Davies. Thanks to everybody who watched. We'll be back on Tuesday. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Adios.